They are playing for scraps and dying for them. Forget glory, this is about the next meal. In a world where a single mistake means starvation, the latest round of the death games just turned into a literal bloodbath for survival. However, Yuki Soramachi wants to pay her bills. That's it. That's the whole thing. The 17-year-old girl is out here risking her life, losing limbs, and watching her friends get impaled by spike traps hidden under plates of desserts, all so she can keep the lights on and the fridge stocked. No chosen one prophecy. No secret bloodline power. Just a girl with a survival rate that would make a military operative cry, doing what she has to do because the world she lives in decided that Des Games broadcast to rich people for entertainment is just how the economy works now. Welcome to Shibuyugi, playing death games to put food on the table. And yes, that's the actual title. If you've been sleeping on this one, I genuinely don't know what to tell you. This show came out of nowhere in the winter 2026 season and immediately started a conversation about what the death game genre is even supposed to be doing in the year of our Lord 2026. Because on the surface, sure, girls in maid outfits, elaborate traps, cotton blood everywhere. Sounds like your standard edgy anime. But underneath that, it's a deeply cynical, deeply psychological story about what it means to survive in a system that was never designed to let you actually win. Today we're breaking down episodes 1 through 8. We're going arc by arc. We're getting into the character psychology. And then, because I love you people, we're going into the manga and light novel material for the secrets the anime hasn't told you yet. Specifically, the truth about the cotton blood, the truth about what the organization is actually doing to these girls, and the jaw-dropping twist about Yuki's mentor, Hakushi, that completely reframes everything we've seen so far. Buckle up. It gets dark, obviously. So before we jump into episode 1, let me give you the 30-second setup because this world has some specific rules you need to understand going in. The death games in Shibuyugi are organized by a faceless corporation and broadcast to an ultra-wealthy global audience. Think Squid Game, but even more nihilistic, and with an aesthetic that's somewhere between a haunted dollhouse and a high-end fetish catalog. The participants are recruited, and I use that word loosely, from the economic underclass. Young women, usually teenagers, usually desperate, who sign up because the cash prize is real and the alternative is worse. Yuki has been doing this since she was young enough that by episode 1, she's already on her 28th game. 28. The average player doesn't survive 5. The current record holder cleared 98 games. Yuki's goal is 99, one more than the record, in honor of her mentor, a legendary player named Hakushi, who Yuki believes died in the 9th game, an absolute nightmare of a scenario called Candlewoods. That goal, that number 99, is Yuki's entire reason for living. She doesn't talk about the future beyond it. She doesn't talk about what she'll do when she gets there. It's just the next game, and the next one grinding toward a number on a leaderboard like it's the only thing tethering her to the world. And honestly, given what we learn later, that might be intentional, but we'll get there. Let's talk about episode 1. Game 28 drops Yuki into what fans have started calling the Ghost House arc, and the vibe is immediately and deliberately unnerving. Director Suda Ueno goes full dreamlike aesthetic here. Think Alice in Wonderland if Lewis Carroll had a lot more to say about class warfare and the male gaze. The setting is a gorgeous, monochrome Victorian mansion. The players wake up in luxurious bedrooms wearing maid uniforms. Everything looks soft and beautiful and completely wrong. There are 6 girls in this game. You've got Yuki, obviously. Then there's Kokudo, who immediately reads as the I'll figure out the shortcut type. And look, in any other show, that attitude might actually be an asset. In Shibuyugi, it gets you killed in the first 20 minutes. There's Benia, a tomboyish girl working off a debt. Same, honestly. And then there's Aoi, shy, blue-haired, immediately giving off massive the writers like her too much for her to survive long energy. The first thing Yuki does, before introducing herself, before trying to make friends, before doing basically anything a normal person would do, is explain the preservation technique to the group. And this is where the show starts showing its hand about who Yuki actually is. The preservation technique is this: the organization modifies the blood of every player before the games begin. When that blood hits open air, when you get cut, when you get stabbed, when you get worse, it doesn't flow like normal blood. It crystallizes. It turns into something that looks almost exactly like cotton, fluffy, white, clinical. It means the deaths are clean. It means the wealthy audience watching from their penthouse viewing parties doesn't have to look at anything messy or biological. The girls can be dismembered on camera, and it looks like a doll being torn apart rather than a human being dying. Yuki explains this to a group of terrified strangers in the same tone you'd use to explain office printer protocols. That's who she is. That is the entire character right there in the first scene. And then Kokudo, probably trying to prove she's not scared, lifts a plate of sweets off the dessert table. Because of course there's a dessert table, the whole mansion is designed to feel like a reward, and a metal spike shoots up through the bottom of the plate and straight through her skull. Cotton blood everywhere. Game 1 fatality confirmed. Yuki's response is to immediately walk over and disable the trap mechanism to retrieve the key hidden underneath it. She doesn't stop for a moment of grief. She doesn't say anything about Kokudo. She just needs the key. And the camera holds on her face while she does it, and there's just nothing there. Not cruelty exactly. Just absence, like that part of her got turned off a long time ago and she's not entirely sure where she put the switch. The Ghost House arc continues into episode 2, and this is where things escalate from unsettling to genuinely disturbing. The group makes their way through the mansion, losing AoE to a room with giant industrial saws, a death that is horrible and sudden and handled by the show with exactly the kind of blunt, matter-of-fact cruelty that the series uses as its signature move. No dramatic music swell, no slow motion. She's just gone. 4 survivors reach the elevator. The elevator has a maximum weight capacity of 330 pounds. 4 people who have all been through at least one game: Yuki, Benia, Momono, and a girl named Kinko, collectively way more than that. This is where Shibuyugi earns its reputation, because what follows is one of the most genuinely disturbing sequences in recent anime memory, and it's disturbing precisely because of how logical it is. Yuki proposes a collective amputation strategy. You reduce the weight by removing weight. Limbs go in the elevator shaft. The math works out. And the truly insane thing is that the other girls agree, because what's the alternative? Yuki cuts off her own leg. Benia cuts off hers. Momono follows. Kinko, in a desperate attempt to contribute enough weight, ends up losing both legs and a hand. They make it into the elevator. 4 bloody, cotton-soaked survivors in a box slowly descending toward the exit. Except when they reach the bottom, the exit door requires a 3rd death to open. It won't unlock until someone else dies. Kinko, who has just sacrificed both of her legs and a hand to get here, who is barely conscious, who has given more than anyone in that elevator, Kinko is still alive, and she is not able to walk out of that door on her own even if it opened. And Yuki knows this, and she kills her. Drives a crutch directly into her face. Clean, quick, necessary. The door opens. The show frames this in a very specific way. It doesn't ask you to cheer for Yuki. It doesn't ask you to condemn her either. It just shows you what happened and lets the silence sit there, heavy and ugly, while Yuki and the 2 remaining survivors walk out into the gray light. Pragmatic altruism. That's the term the fandom has settled on for what Yuki does. She will help you. She will genuinely try to get you through. But the moment you cross the line from asset to obstacle or necessary sacrifice, the equation changes. Yuki doesn't enjoy hurting people. She's not a sadist. She just made a decision a long time ago that survival is a calculation, and she is very, very good at math. Episodes 3, 4, and 5 pull back the timeline to Yuki's 10th game, earlier in her career, before some of the horror has had time to fully calcify on her face. This is the scrap-building arc, and it introduces the single most important rival in the series, Mishiro. Mishiro is what Yuki could have been if she'd chosen a different philosophy. She's a veteran. She's smart. She's ruthless. But where Yuki's ruthlessness is cold and calculated, Mishiro's is loud and contemptuous. She looks at the newer, less experienced players and sees meat shields, resources to be used and discarded. She doesn't bother pretending to care about anyone's survival except her own. The setting is a crumbling skyscraper rigged with landmines and patrolled by a biological weapon. A wolf. An actual wolf. Because sure, why not? These games have a budget apparently. The game structure is going to force the players to vote someone out at the end, eliminating the person who contributed the least. The clue is literally hidden in their costumes. The chiton dresses they're given to wear are ancient Greek democratic attire, which is a genuinely clever bit of symbolism that Yuki picks up on immediately and Michiru ignores because she's busy establishing dominance. The midpoint of this arc gives us one of Yuki's most discussed moments. A rookie named Kotoha gets caught in a landmine explosion. She loses the lower half of her body, and Michiru's group, including Michiru herself, just walks past her. Asset expired, liabilities abandoned, keep moving. Yuki goes back. She picks up what's left of Kotoha and carries her on her back through a landmine field, navigating each step by memory and pattern recognition, keeping Kotoha alive through sheer stubbornness. And the show wants you to feel good about this. It is genuinely moving, but it also makes sure you hear Yuki's internal logic. A girl who was left behind and then saved is emotionally grateful, physically dependent, and deeply motivated to help her rescuer win the vote at the end. Saving Kotoha is the right thing to do. It is also an extremely good strategic move. And Yuki knows both things simultaneously, and she's completely at peace with that. The arc climaxes when the wolf catches up with Michiru and takes her arm. Yuki finds her bleeding out in the wreckage, and instead of immediately helping, Yuki just waits. She stands there looking at this woman who spent the entire game treating people like furniture, and she says very calmly that she'll help as soon as Michiru apologizes. It's one of the funniest moments in the show, honestly, because of the delivery. Totally deadpan. Completely genuine. Michiru is furious and humiliated and also losing a lot of blood, so eventually she apologizes, and Yuki helps her, and you get the sense that this rivalry is going to define the rest of the series. These two are too similar in the ways that matter, and too different in the ways that are going to keep them in each other's orbit indefinitely. Yuki manipulates the final vote, the gas traps take care of the opportunists who weren't going to survive anyway, and the scrap building arc closes with Yuki adding another win to the tally. Jump forward to Game 30, Episodes 6 and 7, and we're now in what the fandom calls the Wall of 30 arc. The setting is a public bathhouse, and before you think this is where the show pivots to fanservice, I need you to know that the bathhouse in Shibuyugi is described by characters within the show itself as a site of industrial slaughter. The show knows what you're expecting, and it does not deliver it. This arc reintroduces Michiru, and the version of Michiru we see now is different. The arm that the wolf took has been replaced by a cold prosthetic, paid for with game winnings, because in this world, your prize money mostly goes toward putting yourself back together. She moves differently. She's quieter. The showboating contempt is mostly gone, replaced by something more methodical and, honestly, more dangerous. She's brought an apprentice, Riko. And Riko is the show's first real look at what happens to a player who goes deep enough into this system. She's young, she seems almost cheerful, and she has had so much of her body replaced with cybernetics that she barely registers as biological anymore. Superhuman speed, superhuman strength, the ability to take hits that would kill anyone else. She's a weapon wearing a person's face. This is also where we really start to understand the economy of Shibuyugi. The prize money keeps you alive, but what you spend it on is a trap. You get hurt, you get repaired with synthetic parts, you come back stronger and more dependent on the organization that controls access to the technology keeping you alive. The longer you play, the more of you belongs to them. It's a subscription model for your own body. Yuki has a silver artificial eye, a replacement for the one she lost in Candlewood's the 9th game, the one she doesn't talk about. The eye record's light. It's surveillance technology embedded in her skull. She's been walking around broadcasting footage, and she may or may not be fully aware of the implications. The Golden Bath sequence, which closes out Episode 7, is genuinely one of the most chaotic things the show has produced. Yuki survives it through a combination of preparation, luck, and absolutely reckless improvisation. She loses several fingers baiting Riko into a machine gun trap, and the show is notably unbothered about making her look cool doing it. She does not look cool. She looks desperate and a little insane and extremely relieved when it works. The fingers will be replaced with vibrating prosthetics. Another piece of her traded in. Another receipt from the organization's catalog. Episode 8 is the pivot point of the season. Everything we've seen so far has been building to this, and the show knows it. We finally get the Candlewoods flashback, Game 9, the one that made Yuki who she is, the one she never fully talks about. The scale of this game is unlike anything else in the series. Over 300 players dropped into a forest. The hunters are called stumps, a term borrowed from the practice of using a tree stump to behead livestock, and that metaphor alone tells you everything you need to know about how the organization views the participants. And in the middle of all this, there's Hakushi, 96 games. The best player Yuki has ever seen. The person who taught Yuki the preservation technique, taught her the cold arithmetic of survival, taught her that the goal is always the next game. Hakushi is calm in a way that almost looks like peace, and Yuki watches her navigate Candlewoods with the kind of awe that 17-year-olds usually reserve for pop stars or athletes. Then there's Mogi. Mogi is what the genre calls a chaotic variable, a player who decides the rules of the game are someone else's problem and starts slaughtering everyone in sight, participants and hunters alike. The Candlewoods game collapses into pure carnage. Yuki makes it out, sole survivor. And she carries with her the absolute certainty that Hakushi didn't, that somewhere in that burning forest her mentor died and left her with only a number, 99. Reach 99 and it means something. Reach 99 and the grief justifies itself. Episode 8 ends there. And if you've only watched the anime, that's where the story stands. Here's the thing about the cotton blood, the preservation technique that the anime has been treating as a background detail. It's not a background detail, it is the entire point. The organization uses it, yes, because their audience wants the violence but is aesthetically squeamish about biological reality. Pretty girls in pretty dresses dying in pretty ways. The girls become dolls, literally and visually, which feeds directly into the power fantasy of the people watching. But the manga goes further. The healing technology, the same tech that replaces Mishiro's arm, Riko's limbs, Yuki's eye and fingers, doesn't just repair damage. Over time, it replaces biological tissue entirely. The synthetic parts don't feel pain. They don't generate the emotional feedback that pain creates. The longer a player survives, the more of their nervous system is synthetic, which means the less of their nervous system is registering the world the way a human being should. The girls who survive the longest don't become hardened warriors. They become increasingly hollow. The organization isn't trying to create champions. They're trying to create the perfect content, performers who can be put through extreme physical trauma on camera without breaking down emotionally, because they literally cannot feel it anymore. Yuki's detachment, the blankness, the cold calculation, the complete absence of visible grief, it's not purely psychological. The anime frames it as a coping mechanism, a choice she made to survive. The manga suggests it's also being done to her biochemically, systemically, one replaced body part at a time. She is becoming a doll, and the organization is holding the scissors. And then there is the matter of Hakushi. She didn't die in Candlewoods. The light novel reveals it plainly. Hakushi survived, she didn't retire to some quiet life away from the games. She joined the organization. She is, at minimum, part of the management structure that runs the very death games she recruited Yuki into. Sit with that for a second. Every choice Yuki has made since Game 9 has been filtered through the grief of losing Hakushi. The 99 game goal isn't Yuki's dream. It's a memorial, a tribute to a woman who may have been working for the people running the show the entire time. The organization gave Yuki a purpose, a number to chase, a reason to keep playing, and they packaged it as loss. The 99 game goal might be a designed psychological anchor, a leash dressed up as a legacy. They didn't just take Yuki's mentor, they made her mentor into the rope. Whether Hakushi genuinely cares about Yuki, whether there's some part of her that's been watching from the inside, hoping Yuki finds a way out, the manga hasn't fully answered yet, but the possibility is there, and it reframes every warm memory Yuki has of her teacher into something much more complicated and much more painful. So, where does that leave us with Yuki herself? Because this is the question the show keeps circling without fully landing on. Is she a hero? Is she a survivor? Is she a villain in the making? Is she just, and this is the reading I keep coming back to, the most successful version of what the organization is trying to produce? She manipulates people. She calculates loyalty. She kills when it's necessary. She's slowly being replaced by synthetic parts. She's chasing a goal that may have been given to her by the people she thinks she's working against. By every conventional narrative metric, she should be the antagonist, but the show keeps framing her from the inside. We see how she rationalizes, how she justifies, how she clings to the idea that there's a version of this where she wins. And because we're in her head, the logic always makes a horrible kind of sense. She's not evil. She's adapted. And maybe those aren't as different as we'd like them to be. The question of whether Yuki is becoming the villain of her own story, or whether she's just the only person who understands the full scope of how bad the story actually is, that is going to define this series going forward. Because if Hakushi is watching, if the 99 goal was always a trap, then at some point Yuki is going to find out. And the person she becomes on the other side of that revelation is going to be completely different from the person who's been grinding these games with a mission. What happens when the mission turns out to be a lie? What happens when the grief turns out to be theater? What happens to someone who's already traded this much of themselves for a number that doesn't mean what they thought it meant? That's the Shibuyugi question. That's the one I genuinely cannot wait to see the show try to answer. In the meantime, episodes 1 through 8 have given us one of the more genuinely interesting protagonists in recent anime, a girl who is at once deeply sympathetic and increasingly terrifying, navigating a world that was designed to consume her, getting closer to the truth with every game and every replaced body part. It's not a comfortable watch. It's not supposed to be. But if you've been looking for a death game anime that actually has something to say beyond the spectacle of the traps, something about capitalism, about exploitation, about what survival costs when the system is designed to make sure you never actually escape, then Shibuyugi is doing that work. Drop your theories in the comments. Do you think Hakushi is pulling strings from inside the organization, or did she genuinely cut ties with Yuki and move on? Is there a version of this story where Yuki wins, actually wins, not just survives? And how many fingers does she have left before we need to start having a real conversation about what Yuki even means at this point? I'll see you in the next one. Try not to become cotton.